Trayvon had asked me earlier to introduce myself a little bit more. I am an attorney. I do juvenile defense, but specifically, and as it relates to tonight's conversation, I help students who are subject to discipline in the schools around the state of Washington, mostly in King, Snohomish, and Pierce counties. And I'm also a criminal defense attorney. So I have the experience to assist students through the disciplinary process when there's a contemporaneous law enforcement investigation. That's sort of how I've narrowed my practice now. But I've been practicing for 30 years, both in King and Snohomish County as a public defender, mostly in juvenile court and drug court, King County Drug Diversion Court. So I bring that experience today, and I'm going to talk about the law a lot. Hopefully some others will talk about policy. But I just want to say off the bat that, you know, school to prison pipeline can mean different things to different people. In my world as a lawyer, it has a specific meaning. And frankly, the terminology has been used in case law. Back in 2012, there was a specific case filed by the Department of Justice through the Office of Civil Rights against the city of Meridian in Mississippi. And the suit was based upon the school districts there actually incarcerating students for discipline violations and minimal ones like dress code violations or tardiness. Instead of having a disciplinary process that we're familiar with here in Washington, these students would be subjected to interrogation by police, and they'd be taken straight to the juvenile detention center. So in that instance, it was literal school to prison pipeline. Generically, you know, particularly in jurisdiction like Washington, we think of it more in terms of a series of practices and policies that ultimately funnel children and adolescents from the school, public school system into the criminal justice system. And, you know, that's obviously an issue. That's why we're talking about it. I'm so happy to be a part of this, because the other issue is that the school to prison pipeline disproportionately affects students of color, students who have disabilities, lesbian and gay youth, etc. So it's important that we focus on it and address it and help prevent it. The only other thing I wanted to say is that in my experience as a lawyer, you know, as a frontline soldier defending students, you know, weekly, I'm interested in sort of the root cause of the school to prison pipeline, and I see it in a variety of areas, from, you know, these zero tolerance policies that schools have to implicit bias that's held by the administrators, the use of security. Thankfully, around 2020, Seattle Public Schools, for example, got rid of SROs, but they're still in jurisdictions around the state. So to my way of thinking, there's a lot of root causes of the school to prison pipeline. And I'm here and interested to hear what other people's perspective is. But I see it manifested in our community because students are in fact excluded from school rather than responded to in a more supportive way. There's this punitive mentality. And frankly, in my opinion, from dealing with administrators, it's more simple for administrators to just say students out and that's it, they move on, rather than something more effective like a restorative justice or peace circle or something along those lines. That's all.
Thank you, Molly. Dana, got any words? Oh, I mean, Molly. Thank you, Dana.
I got you.
Thank you, Dana. Any words, Molly?
I got you, cousin. So I'll say a little bit about myself as well. I'm noted here as representing Seattle Central, but I actually represent a little bit more than that. And Seattle Central is an institution that I work at. And part of my role there is overseeing student support programs, and a piece of student support programs is supporting folks who are reaching towards their education while they're currently incarcerated, and those who are coming to education after incarceration. I'm also a founding member of a nonprofit called Rooted Community Collective, where we support folks coming home, heal from the trauma of coming home from incarceration. We provide heal circles for young people and adults. And then I also have been a long time volunteer with the Black Prisoners Caucus at Clallam Bay, Stafford Creek, in Shelton. Well, I call it Shelton, but I guess it's Washington Correction Center. And so that's sort of my connections with prison and from the educational standpoint. I also have a child who's in middle school who uses special education supports. And I've been a parent within Seattle Public Schools. So say that to say how I come to this perspective. And I think, you know, the school to prison pipeline, while I think we can look at it in multiple ways within our laws and our discipline policies. I worked with Seattle Public Schools last year to look at their discipline policies in their handbook. I mean, that's just one way, right? What do we write in the handbook? Who do we even, whose pictures, you know, I had to get down to like, why are all the pictures of people in the handbook brown people? Because you assume we see ourselves in the discipline process. So it's a way that I think one of the ways we don't look at this from a systemic level with an analysis is how do we, for lack of a better word, or to make up a word, how do we culturate, right? Cultivize certain folks to be desensitized to getting towards the prison, right? So we have many kids who will experience lots of interactions within their school and within their community. And they may seem like small moments, but what they really are doing is desensitizing them to a system that they may ultimately end up in. And when they get there, right, the food in prison is going to taste just like the food in school. The discipline that they received in school, even though the school, even from schools that say, you know, we don't send people out of school. We have restorative practices in school. You know, at my daughter's school last year, they had a big field trip, and we all got notices if your kid had any discipline or has been late a lot. Then they won't be able to go on the field trip. And my daughter was one of the kids who, you know, there were some things in her personal life that were happening, and she was late to school a lot. And they met her right at the front door with the little paperwork that said, hey, you've been late, and join us over here in this room. We're going to put you in for the day, as she watched all the other kids get on buses. So, you know, that was her first entryway into a warehousing. And you get warehoused enough or left out enough, you start to get comfortable in that. And then when behaviors start to come up, what we do is we come up with policies and practices that address the behavior, and we don't stop and ask, why is this behavior happening? You know, when people show up angry, when people show up hurt, when people don't show up at all, that is a symptom of something. It can be something, a symptom of I'm hungry, I'm experience violence at home, in my community. School is an unsafe place. I don't see myself in the curriculum. What's the point? And if I'm 11, 12, 13, I don't have the emotional capacity or the emotional intelligence yet to regulate. You know, I'm going through some things at work as a full-fledged 47-year-old adult. And I had to come home and tell my daughter today, whoo, I remember when you were upset last year, and I had to talk you through, you felt like the only two options were somebody needs to apologize to me or I'm hurting somebody. And I came home from work today thinking somebody needs to apologize to me or I'm hurting somebody, right? But I have at least adults, some emotional to walk myself back from that. And so I think it's a longer, bigger picture. And when our communities experience harm, it's painful. And our initial reaction is to say we want justice. And we have yet in our society to unpack what we mean by we want justice. And when I drive by that youth cage every day on my way to work, and I see a big sign with a signing bonus of $25,000 to come become a corrections officer in a kid cage, I think, what could we be doing with that discretionary funds? Somehow we have money to pay people extra to police kids inside of a cage, but we don't have any funds to seek out support and help and love and connection in our communities, except if our communities are experiencing this violence. I used to work in private schools. I can tell you right now, when those kids created harm, you know, were disciplined, everybody in that school and everybody in that community knew exactly what to do to make sure that kid never experienced the criminal injustice system in any way, shape, or form. So we do know what to do in our schools when it comes to various communities. We never would have built a youth cage on Mercer Island or in Bellevue, or, you know, name all the other places. We would have said this is a public health crisis and we need to step in.
Thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate that. The next question is about disciplinary policies inside the classroom. Now, this is, I don't want to say my favorite thing, but like one of my things where it affected me personally as well, because how we're disciplined is basically little things like or like defending myself. You know, and so yeah, I just want you guys to get into it. Here's the next question. It says, how do current disciplinary policies in our schools contribute to or mitigate the school to prison pipeline, and what changes do you believe are necessary? Now, this is a question to Sharonda and LaMaria Pope and Johnny Walker Jr. Sharonda, can you please start us off?
Thank you, Trayvon. Good afternoon. I am the proud principal of Interagency Academy. I'm in my 3rd year. I was a pandemic principal. A lot of people say you were a pandemic baby. I was a pandemic principal starting this work. And so it's been a pleasure and challenge at the same time. And, you know, in politics, they say it's the economy, stupid. And I would like to say that not calling anyone stupid is the catchphrase, but it's instructional practice. It is emotional internal work for adults. The discipline that we see is the iceberg. It's the tip of the iceberg, the outcome. But underneath that, it is how human beings show up. And so how do school districts train educators to do the emotional work? What does it mean to be an anti-racist educator? How does your trauma as a human being shows up in the classroom as you're educating students? A lot of times we would like to just focus on the student and say the student is a problem, but we're all humans in this work. And if you're not aware of your traumas and your triggers as a human being standing in front of kids, you will greatly affect and impact. Discipline is a lot of times used as a scapegoat because we don't know what to do. We don't know what strategies to do in that moment when you're triggered. And a lot of times you're trying to remain calm or trying to bring calmness to a situation. And that is not an excuse. It's just explaining in real time what practitioners are dealing with in that moment. So my suggestion is, like, education system, like if we're really serious about this work, it's emotional intelligence before anti-racism. A lot of times we want to focus on the epistemology of indigenous cultures. We want to focus on discipline practice, but we have not focused on the internal shame that we have when approaching this work. We have not focused on the blaming that we do. We haven't focused on our fear as an educator in approaching this work. So I believe we should flip that paradigm and stop focusing just on anti-racist practice, because a lot of people hide behind that. Because you sound good and you know all the terminology. Like, oh, yeah. But then when I look at what you do in practice, it's not there. But if we flip the paradigm and to focus on emotional intelligence and how you are as a human being, we focus on that first, that'll tell me everything I need to know about your practice as an educator. So that's where I think we need to start revolutionizing educational systems and looking at literally therapy for adults in the system. You know, corporation has a performance coach. Those big corporations, they got a performance coach that you can go in and say, you know what, I'm struggling with performance, and they get you back together. Why can't we do that for educators? So that's where I'll just leave it at. I'm a dreamer. So if I had it my way, if I was president of the United States, that's what I would do. Because I think to really transform educational systems, it has to be that deep of psychology and emotional work for the educators that run the system.
I can jump in. Hi, everybody. My name is LaMaria. I'm program manager. I choose 180 over the school-based divergent programming that focuses in on restorative practices with our young people in the schools in Seattle and Highline District. And Sharonda, you girl took my words out my mouth. Like, I truly, firmly believe, you too, Molly, I firmly believe that it starts exactly there. And I feel like within the schools, we need to enforce more, you know, restorative practices within the admin, within the teachers. They need to truly learn like what that looks like amongst themselves. And then they can understand, what's being pushed down into the young people, bringing in restorative groups for teachers. We have them, we're in the school, we're doing it with the young people, but they can't understand and meet students where they're at without a full, clear understanding of what restorative justice looks like. And, our program is an alternative for suspension and expulsion. I'm still seeing kids be suspended, behind our back. And it's like, we're right here. You missed us. And in the curriculum as well, it might not even be the young people that are skipping school or that are getting in the fights or engaged in anything that would be the norm to suspend, right? I could go to school, and I mean, I can speak for myself. I went all the way through school. I graduated with a 3.6, and I still entered into that system because I didn't have a plan. I wasn't taught about, I come from low income housing and low income, and growing up in the South End of Seattle, I didn't know what credit was. I didn't have these resources. So if we start there, it'll definitely eliminate, and we can beat that school to prison pipeline. I think so. Implementing, justice practice for the admin, and then putting in more support services for our young people. Resources are hidden. We need to push that to our young people so that they know and they're aware.
And just to piggyback off of LaMaria, I'm Johnny Walker. What's going on, Trayvon? Good seeing you, young brother. Well, see, I had the luxury of being in schools for 10 years and also working in a nonprofit with at-risk youth. So I've kind of seen a little bit of both. I think one thing that I take for what I see is like just more patience, right? I feel like when we're in the work, we deal with a lot of burnout. I feel like we deal with a lot of not knowing of how the days are going to present themselves, right? So I've been in classroom settings with amazing teachers that would have challenges but stay patient every single day. One thing that I bank off, and sorry, Johnny Walker, Choose 180, program manager for our aftercare program, which is geared towards mentorship. And I've been with the org for going on 5 years now. But one thing that I've seen is we don't necessarily like LaMaria said, just meet the students where they're at, or the young people where they're at, right? We don't know what kind of home environment they're coming from, how they're having to wake up every day and just kind of figure life out. I've been in situations where mom's lights was being cut off. She's doing all she can. There's multiple siblings in the house, and one of my clients just wants to do amazing, but doesn't necessarily have the tools to push them forward to succeed in those areas, right? But I feel like if you kind of dig deep into like actually caring about what's going on in community and digging deep in what's carrying on about with these young people, that we could get very far. Because one thing we do know is that like LaMaria said, resources hidden, but stories are hidden. Like if you don't like, who really wants to open up unless you're showing me that you care for me to open up? Nobody's going to openly just come out and tell their story without necessarily feeling like the conversation is going to be in good hands, or I could trust what I'm going to deliver to you, right? And so one thing I tell my staff, I was just in a meeting earlier, and I say, you could be with this kid an hour out the day. He could listen to everything you have to say. He's taking it in. You guys have a plan, but we have to be aware that he's going back to his environment, his home, his community, the other 23 hours out the day. And that could turn into survival. You know what I'm saying? And so I just spent 1 hour with my mentor, 2 hours with my mentor, but then I'm spending the other 22 hours trying to figure out how I'm going to survive, how I'm going to be able to make it through. No wonder why I'm coming to school at 9 o'clock in the morning the next day, just on edge, trying to figure it out. And then I'm getting here, my teacher's down my back, our admin might be down my back because I have a track record, but we're not paying attention to why my track record might be what it is. It's not that I necessarily want to be this way or I want to do things a certain way. It's that I'm not having a proper guidance or a proper help to get me through. And so I think it just starts with like consistency and be able to build trust in community. Um, you know, one thing that was big for me when I was growing up was like, if we ran the streets, we had safe havens. The community center was a big deal. Now we don't really have that. You got to kind of pay $5 to go into the gym to play basketball now. You know what I'm saying? And things of that sort. And so a lot of things are just kind of being taken away from us. But I think for us to get on the positive side of things, it's just to be able to build and be able to trust with each other to see how, what I'm saying, to erase the deficit and move forward with positive progression. I could kind of go on and on and on, but that's just my take.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, for bringing it back, you know what I'm saying? Thinking so deep about it, and also, real life situations. And it's really, really dope to see how, we all have something in common here. And also I do want to say, before I go to you, Dana, I see your hands up. I really don't like, what's the word called? Like pushing back, or, don't want to let you guys speak how you speak, but time-wise, I'm trying to be timely here. So keep speaking how you speaking, please do. But at the same time, be considerate at the time as well. Go ahead, Dana. Yeah, I saw your hand was up.
Thank you. I just had a question for those who just spoke, because my experience also with dealing with administrators, Ms. Willingham, what you were talking about, emotional, IQ, etc., spot on. The other issue I see is the parents of the other student involved, or the family members of the other student involved. Like the administrators, they don't have enough courage or knowledge of the policies. So, you try to bring up restorative justice practices and coming together. And I just hit a lot of roadblocks with that with administrators, because either they don't have their own, sense of things, or like we're talking about emotional intelligence, but also they don't know how to deal with the pressures of the other parents or family members. So then they don't participate, they don't let their student participate, and or they don't have their student come to school. And then, whether it's the aggressor or the victim, now nobody's coming to school, and it just snowballs. Mm-hmm. Any comments, experiences from?
Yes, you're very accurate with that. I think what happens is that you have all these different people entering into the equation with different life experiences about what is discipline, what is consequences, what are these things. And so we use something called the social discipline window, which is a 4-quadrant way of looking at discipline. So in that, you are either being collaborative, which is the restorative window. Everyone at the table wants to collaborate with each other. They want to get to the bottom of it. And so you have that discipline window of the quadrant. Then you have the punishment window where people just want punishment. And then you have the window where it's permissive, like everything goes. There's no boundaries. We're over sentimentalists. We're over, all these things. And then the other window is leaving me right now, but you get the point. And everyone enter into that equation differently. And some people want the punishment route. And that's just a societal thing that we have to continue to work towards, because this is new, right? And you have people who went to school and they're used to exclusionary practices. And so you can't change everyone's mind, you can't change everyone's heart, but what you can do is the people that work within the system, you can have certain qualifications or certain things, certain professional developments that you have to do. But with parents, that's going to be case by case basis, and it's up to that administrator to hold the line, which is why this job is extremely hard for administrators. You have so many stakeholders. You have your parents, you have your teachers, you have your students, you have the district office, you have your community partners, and you have to show up to all of these people balance, right? And that is extremely hard jobs. I think principals really could be mayors of cities, because you have so many constituents that you have to be accountable to and show up in a way that they will receive you. So it's not an easy thing to do at all, and it's just something that we're going to have to keep working at.
I really like this question because I feel like it talks about meeting where the student is at, if that makes sense. And because I was in foster care, and then when I was doing my little research about how I'm supposed to be in prison, like the percentage is crazy to me about how I'm supposed to be presented. I'm supposed to be in prison because, and especially because I'm a Black male. It's really interesting in how you guys can talk about this and how you guys can meet students where they at, because I know it has to do so much more than just school. I am bringing myself to school. You know what I'm saying? I'm bringing what I have on, my scars on, what I got on to school. So let me get to the question. In what ways do you see the school to prison pipeline disproportionately affecting certain student populations, particularly in terms of race, socioeconomic status, or special education status? This question's towards Sharonda and Molly. Molly, can you start us off, please?
Sure, I'll try to be succinct, because I think the answer is really complicated. Well, it's not complicated, but there's so nuanced and there's so many ways. But I think at minimum, it's the way we police certain communities, the way that we also socialize to believe that certain behaviors immediately are dangerous. And then we go to the one thing that we think we know that keeps everybody safe, which is to remove this human. And I appreciate you and honor that you're sharing a piece of your story. And another program that I work with is folks who who have been in the foster care system or unaccompanied minors as they join their educational journey at the college. And I also work with veterans. And so sometimes the students that come in are the same. It's one student who is part of all three of those populations. They've been through the foster care system. They went off to the military, went to prison, and they're now coming back to their educational process. I can't remember the name right now, but there is a foster care facility on 12th Avenue. And what's interesting, talk about how we set up people to pipeline them or assume what we know what their trajectory or future will be, is the foster care facility on 12th and Adler is right next to the federal halfway house. So people leaving federal prison go there. And then right across the street is the youth, well, I call it the cage, the youth cage, right? And so just that cycle right there in one corner, in the Central District, the historically Black neighborhood of Seattle, something like that wouldn't and doesn't exist in other neighborhoods, right? And so it's where we, so, and then if you're on your way to, why is the name escaping me? The elementary school on the corner, right? So you're a Black or brown family walking your elementary student down 12 to go
Bailey
to your
Gatzer.
Title I school. Yeah, thank you, Bailey Gatzer. Walk right to go past the federal the halfway house, past the youth jail, past, right, keep going in that community down 12th. So these things just exist because the idea is that these are all your options, right? And so one of the things, a documentary now, Junior, involved in this is Since I've Been Down. One of my favorite pieces is when one of the women who did time in the women's prison talks about when your community has 5 choices and my community has 2, are there really choices, right? And so I have 2 options for myself. And so think about that when you're on 12th in the Central District, right? That those communities, those students, those folks who are predominantly Black and brown, predominantly low income, what are the choices on your way to elementary school? I'll leave it there because I could get myself worked up.
I think the school to prison pipeline disproportionately affecting certain student population with socioeconomic status, that we are a levy school, which we partner with Seattle, the city of Seattle government. We are one of their schools, and where the city pours money into our schools to help us to create effective programming for our students. And the city of Seattle is one of the few cities in the country, the United States, that does that type of measure. So it's something that we should applaud our city for doing, and is investing in their schools, because it really is an economic issue. The fact that we are not caring for our young people in our schools and then wonder why society is falling apart. And it's really interconnected. So how do we get government helping to fund more into schools and create these wraparound services so that students actually get the safety network that racism has literally taken away? So as the government has taken away through racist policies, the government needs to give back in race and equity policy, but also funding schools in a way that can actually get students and families up on the social mobility within society. So thinking about how are we partnering with families, because a lot of our students are struggling. They come from an ecosystem. So if our students are struggling, our families are struggling as well. So how can school district partner with families to get their social economic needs met through the system? And it's a one-stop shop. Like, seriously, schools are going to have to become this wraparound service model to actually change the economic disadvantages that people of color have experienced in society. And so a lot of this work, it's really policy work, but we have to think about how we can change the paradigm with public education. And that's, I mean, we're just going to be like a hamster on a wheel doing the same thing over and over and over. What are we doing differently to actually change the socioeconomic status of Black and brown families? And how are we thinking about that in a different way that we haven't thought about before? and using that with intentionality. Also see the intersectionality of mental health. You know, a lot of our students end up being excluded out of school because they have mental health concerns that have not been addressed. And the stigma that happens in Black and Brown families and communities around mental health. But the brain is the currency in education. So if brain is the currency in education and how you get an education, why are we not investing funds in education so that students are healthy and whole mentally, emotionally? And again, these are things that we have to start thinking about differently in order to really change society.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Here we have our last question. And I love this last question. It kind of wraps it up saying, you know, okay, I'm gonna just get to the question so I don't spoil it. Can you share examples of successful alternative discipline practices or restorative justice programs that have proven effective in reducing the pipeline of effect? This question is towards Dana Brown and LaMaria Pope and Johnny Walker.
I can speak to programs that are proven to work in the school systems currently. Our school-based diversion program has worked tremendously. And the main core to the program is having young people have like a connected adult, like a supportive adult. In the end, you know, in the beginning, we give a survey, and at the end, we give a survey, and we ask the same exact questions, and we see these numbers of what students have a connected adult and who don't. And by the end, our program coordinators are trusted, connected adults, and we're seeing these young people succeed in their classes. We're seeing them show up to school. One of the highest percentage of our referrals come from, you know, students that are skipping. They're showing up to school because they know it's Choose 180 day. Like they're coming to meet their mentor, and they're showing up. Their attendance is improving, their grades is improving. I've had parents call me, and you know, they're doing better at home because we're setting goals and we're trying to, you know, identify the root of whatever is going on. And we're creating attainable goals. Rather it's academically, or you know, they got a goal to do better at home, whatever it is. We're teaching them with the cognitive behavior model that they can identify what it is that they need to work on, you know, because it starts with self. And I don't really like to say that because they only know what they're taught, rather it's from home or in school or influence, TikTok, whatever it is. And we get them, you know, to identify the root of what it is, and they have the connected adults. We have aftercare. So we're not just meeting with our young people and pushing them out. We have our aftercare. We follow up with them. Once they're in Choose 180's family, they're in Choose 180's family for life. And I can attest to that. I was a Choose 180 participant. And I started, you know, young, and now look at me, you know, like program manager, I'm here. I can attest to having that person, you know, show up for you and support you can be the change. And having the cognitive behavior model as a resource to identify like the deeper root, it could bring something out of you. So, you know, I think all of our programs at Choose 180, I could let JJ talk, you know, more to our programs that we have, that we all use this model, the cognitive behavior model. We have our curriculum, and we come in, and it's all based off restorative practices.
Yeah, to piggyback off LaMaria, and let's be clear, I worked with LaMaria about 10 years ago when she was at Aki Karosi, and she was completely off the hook. But with guidance and with help and with the village that she had around her, she has become this young, beautiful young lady that you guys see, and she works hard, and she earned everything that she has in front of her. So I just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, aftercare. So just, you know, everybody, you know, we hear the term mentor, right? One thing that I learned when it comes to mentorship is that these days young people relate to who has a story similar to them, right? We could all get out here and want to do the footwork, but how am I going to be able to trust you with my story if you haven't been through anything that I've been through in my life, right? So mentorship is cool, but it has to be mentorship that's revolving around the young people that we're dealing with. When I came to Choose 180, one thing that caught my eye that was big. I worked for Alive and Free for 8 years. I was an outreach worker for 8 years, and honestly, Choose 180's model actually stole me from Alive and Free, because one thing that I noticed that worked, and we don't do it now because of COVID, but we had diversion workshops, right? But it wasn't just a regular diversion workshop. It was a workshop where, yeah, young people came to get their charges dismissed, but it was like it felt like it just felt so genuine. It felt like it was like family, right? So instead of just the young people coming to get charges dismissed, we had volunteers get up there that spoke about the challenges in their lives that turned them around. Some of the most horrible stories that you could ever hear. So we had parents, we had a group for parents. So it wasn't just the young people coming to get their charge dismissed, but it was also, we had somebody that held a class at the same time for parents that was struggling, single parents, no matter if it was man or woman, just getting tools to be able to push their child through on an everyday basis, because they have, because they have concerns and they have questions, right? And so, like I said, it takes a village. But one thing that I got out of the diversion workshop was, and it doesn't have to be diversion, it could be triggered around anything. But one thing that I got is that when we split up to those small groups, which is why aftercare like kind of became a big deal for Choose 180, because when we split up to the small groups with 10 young people and about 2 facilitators, and we was able to start telling those stories. The ones that was just there to just get the get their charges dismissed, they opened up. They let us know our struggles. They wanted more resources. They wanted a mentor. They wanted to see what Choose 180 was about, and that's why aftercare just became such a big deal. And most of our programs, to be honest, because we literally went from diversion, COVID happened, and then next thing you know, we're launching like 10 programs and 30 more staff, just because we was tending to the need of the community. So I think that's one way, a positive way for sure. But mentorship, like with getting in schools, getting these curriculums and these nonprofits in schools to be able to, to be able to assist with some things that's going on in schools, because we know that teachers can only do so much. We also know that the admin can only do so much. It literally takes a village, and that's the way. I think that's the only way we're going to be able to get on the positive side.
Just to follow that thought, I've been in this county, like I said, for 30 years. And, I was doing juvenile defense before Choose 180 even existed. So I think it's important for all of us to educate ourselves about, the politicians who support these programs, prosecutors who support these programs, and keep it going. I was just speaking with a former judge who's now into politics, and advising him to, help continue to make changes to the laws, because in 2018 and then again in 2020, school discipline policies are based upon the Washington Administrative Code, which is based upon the RCW. So the school discipline policies, for example, there's one that says that the schools must consider an alternative form of discipline before imposing a suspension or expulsion. And that's huge. That helps us lawyers who are on the front line point to something when we're talking to these administrators. Hey, you didn't do this. What was the alternative form of discipline? Now my proposal is to get restorative justice in there, in that line of requirements. The school must consider restorative justice practices and alternative forms of discipline before imposing a suspension or expulsion. So these bigger pictures of supporting programs like Choose 180, and supporting or informing yourself about the laws so that you can have an impact on change. But on the flip side, I'm gonna say that doesn't always work. You know, I'm in there advocating, like Miss Willingham was saying before, about, you know, you have to approach these things on a case-by-case basis. I have the luxury of representing one student at a time, and so I do approach it at a case-by-case basis, and I will point to statutes, I will point to school discipline policies, and it goes nowhere with these administrators, principals, vice principals. Like restorative justice, it is written in the school district policies, but the schools don't abide by them. They don't barely consider them, in my experience with the clients I've represented. So I have to get creative and come up with other persuasive means to keep my student in school and not have a record, because part of this prison to pipeline thing is a record. Okay, once you get labeled, it's difficult to get rid of that when you go to the next school or you're not going to school. I mean, it's just, everybody I think in this group knows, perpetuates itself. So in terms of the alternative options, or I can't remember exactly what the question was, examples of successful alternative discipline practices. I'm gonna have to give away my secrets here, but what I do is I really have to think outside the box, because the administrators don't follow their own policies. And my biggest thing, and if, you know, anything I say here today is remembered, you know, the idea of developing strategies to reinforce positive behavior is key. You know, we're stuck on this model of consequences and impact based on negative behaviors, but the power of reinforcing positive behavior, I think, is the only way that we're going to get ourselves out of the situation we've gotten ourselves in. And what do I mean by that? Well, for example, if I'm trying to come up with an alternative, if the student has engaged in a behavior that in fact violates the policy, but I still don't want them out of school, you know, what do I do? And how do I incorporate this positive behavior idea that I'm telling you guys about? Well, one thing that's in the school policies regarding discipline is this option for behavioral contracts. Now, most of us might think of a behavioral contract as student has to do X, Y, and Z, and if they don't, then they're in more trouble. I'm not talking about it in that regard. I'm talking about a contract whereby if the student positively engages, or oftentimes I'll create some sort of contract whereby if the student remains out of trouble for a designated period of time, not only are they allowed immediately back in school, but the record of the emergency expulsion or the short-term suspension or even the long-term suspension, whatever it was, can be removed from the record. So it's incentive for the student to stay in school and engage in a positive way to get the benefit of the reward of the record getting clean. Another thing that I focus on is one of the other panelists talked about mental health. Like, go there, evaluate that, help determine if there are underlying issues that either led to the behavior or contributed to the behavior, such that, you know, you can mitigate the circumstances. So I think it's along the lines of what everybody's been saying all along, is dig deeper, pay attention, figure out what's going on with this particular student. You know, have they had any food this morning, or did they come from, you know, a huge fight or domestic violence in the home, or what have you? Understand what's going on with that student, and try to get an alternative resolution going, rather than the standard, you know, you violated a rule, boom, you're suspended for 10 days. Another important thing that I've learned to create in the last, I've been doing student discipline for the last 14 years, after I got out of public defense, is the re-engagement plan. No matter what's going on with the student, they're going to go back to school, or they have the right to return to school. So a lot of times administrators, I find, and sometimes even parents, don't understand the significance of re-entry into school. Because while that student's been gone, everybody's been talking about what happened, you know, in the hallway, you know, last month or what have you. And so returning to that environment can be very difficult. So having a robust re-engagement strategy for that student returning to school, who can that student go to? Let's appoint a point person for that student if there's trouble, or if they're being question about what happened, or why have you been out of school for the last 30 days or what have you. So the re-engagement is a significant step that's often overlooked. And then sometimes, frankly, you know, particularly in the elementary and middle schools, because I have unfortunately represented kids as young as 6 and 7 years old that have been expelled from school. So my practice, you know, ranges from, you know, first grade all the way to college. I represent students at the University of Washington, college, university level. But I find in those younger schools, the elementary and middle, sometimes even switching schools is a viable option. Schools don't like to do that. There's a lot of administrative red tape, but for whatever reason, or for a lot of reasons, it's not a benefit to that student to go back into that environment where there was that fight or that melee, or somebody was alleged to be a school shooter, and when they return back to school, they're just labeled school shooter. Or I've had bomb threats, or all kinds of, you know, types of cases where that student returning back to that environment might not be the best thing. It's more difficult in high school because there's usually one high school for a larger area where there's a couple of middle schools and a couple of elementary schools. So it's not applicable under all circumstances. But as I said, I have to get creative in order to help my students get back into the education environment, return to school, and be on the path to success. So there are alternatives, and you know, restorative justice is one of my favorite. But the reality is that this, in my experience, maybe I'm, you know, I don't know, the schools don't really go down that road. So you have to get creative, and you have to get individualized to that student's needs. That's my answer to the alternative discipline principles or policies.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Sharonda, go ahead. I see your hands raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to add something. I'm a little protective over the administrators because I am one. And I just want to say it is a very stressful job. You have like 20 things hitting you at once. And so I think a part of the problem is, I think in society, we scapegoat schools too much. And so I put some stats in the chat. We're working with this organization called Homeworks to increase home visits this year. But she did some research, and she did the amount of time that a student is in schools. And she did it by the amount of hours in a whole year. So everyone knows that a student has to attend school 180 days a year. And we say that's a lot, but she actually broke it down to the amount of hours in the year. So in a year, students only spend 14% of their year with us. 14% is the amount of time we have our students, and it goes down to 11% when you put in transitioning to class, lunchtime, extracurricular activities. So you're talking about 11% of an effect that a school can have in a child's life. They spend about 33% of that time sleeping. The other 53% of that time is in the community. So why are we putting so much pressure on schools to figure this out? Again, it needs to be a paradigm shift. Programs like Choose 180 need to be embedded in the schools, and it's just a part of the way we do business, because that educator has an evaluation that they have to do. They feel pressure for students to meet standards, scaffolding, differentiating activities, SEL, and they have 30 of these humans in the classroom, and the principal has 1,000 of these humans. So although we do need to get better, and I don't take that back, we do need to get better, and there's a lot of training that we need to do. But if we expect schools to be the only one to solve this problem, we are missing the boat.
Thank you, Sharonda. I really want to get to the questions, but Molly, go ahead.
I'll be quick. and Sharonda, I'm not discounting what you said, but my comment was going back a little bit in that we've talked a little bit about, professional development and educator training or community member training. And I'm going to put this as an educator for over 24 years. I'm putting this on myself and my profession is one of the things that we don't talk. And we talk a lot about professional development and educator training, but what we haven't talked about in a lot of spaces is hiring. And the fact that we are spending so much money, time, and energy to retrain people who are already in the building and undo the harm that has happened is where we need to start back at the beginning. How are our education programs at places like Seattle Central or the University of Washington, or name all the places, training folks to be educators? And then what are our hiring practices that allow this harm to come through in their profession? And I hold myself accountable for that as well. So, we're spending a lot of money, I think, on the Band-Aids and disappearing people, and we're spending little to no money on getting to the root causes.
Thank you so much for everyone answering that question. I do want to say, LaMaria, we're like twins. We went through the system, and now we're back here being manager. And I ain't a manager. Yeah, you bigger than me, but that's so amazing to see. I appreciate all the panelists for today. Please give a round of applause. You just have a round of applause. Yay. But now I want to open up the panelists to some questions from the audience. You guys can either raise your hands or put it in the chat. If you guys want to read it, you guys can read it. But yeah, we're trying to get y'all some questions. For 5 minutes left. We kind of went over, but you cannot stop the genius in this room. You can't stop the intelligence in this room. So yeah.
Trayvon, we have Sherilyn.
Yes, Sharon. I was gonna say your name, but I did not want to mistake it. So
I know I need an extra L in there. That'll make it so much easier. It's spelled like the singer, by the way. For those of you who remember her. I am a parent of a 19-year-old and I'm one who's still in the system because he's in the Bridges program, which is the 18 to 21 transition program for students with disabilities. And then I got a 21-year-old who's got through it and she fit the system. But I'm also a co-president for the Seattle Special Education PTSA. And I didn't know until in the last 2 years how horrible isolation is. To hear Dana talk about the little kids. So the part where something like 98% of the students who are restrained and isolated and have a disability, whether they're receiving special education services or whether they're receiving the correct special education services. And then you also have of course, the intersectionality of you do then have BIPOC, because there's a whole lot of problems with special education in taking Black kids and Black and brown kids and deciding that their behavior is actually indicative of a learning problem. What do we do to get isolation ended? They literally build cells in classrooms. In the Tri-Cities, I know of they built a small padded room with, it's a padded cell with a locking door, and I'm not saying anything that a lot of people here don't know. It's mind-boggling to me that we set that up and then we're surprised at some of the outcomes.
anybody can answer that. That's completely up to you guys.
It's just the thing they said that structure produces behavior. So what you're saying is you set the structure up for isolation, then why are we surprised? And keep going back to it's a paradigm change. Like we keep, you know, modifying this little thing over here and modifying that little thing over there and putting it, it's not going to be enough. We really have to rethink the entire system.
Anyone else want to hit the question? If not, we'll go on to the next question.
Oh,
I
Maggie
see
has her hand up.
you said Maggie.
Yeah.
Maggie. Mhm.
Damn, see you. I see you. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just remembering that early in this discussion, I believe it was Molly said that the private schools get it right. And I want to know what they do. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, and that wasn't a nod to like send your kids to private school or anti.
It's okay.
I'm just saying, yeah, I'm saying that we know solutions because they are happening for certain communities. Solutions are happening, interventions are happening, people are showing up, dollars are going forward. All these things, you know, are happening. Yeah.
But there's nothing specific that you can point to that they do that public schools should emulate.
Well, I think it happens in multiple ways, right? And so let's say a child, a young person is caught selling drugs in middle school. That happens in private school. They don't call the police.
Okay.
Right? They do not call the police.
Yeah.
The school counselor gets involved. The parents are asked to show up. If the parents can't show up, then find out who else in the community is their support system. They gather every adult in the school. Who is this
Their
kid
village.
connected to?
Their village.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, if somebody better know who their village is at the school, outside the school, you know, everybody better not call the police. Everybody better not talk about this outside of the building. So all those things are in play, right? And so when a kid, usually a kid of color, a kid low income, is doing the same thing and is selling drugs or caught with drugs, we call the police. Cart them away. Nobody interacts with their village. Nobody interacts with their community. Nobody goes to 180, choose 180 first, right? They go to choose 180 after the kid has been put through the system, after the kid has been harmed, after the community has been harmed. And then they say, hey, choose 180. We have this kid. So that's just one example.
Which makes it 1,000 times worse to move forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think we have time for one more, right? I believe so. And yeah.
That's Joe. Joe has been doing like this.
Yeah, I seen Joe too, man. I appreciate you doing that, Joe. Where's Joe?
I appreciate it. First of all, again, my name is Joe Hunter. I'm a chair of RARE. And so again, thanks for all the panelists that have taken time to participate in this open discussion here. A lot of great information. A lot of folks I haven't seen in a while. So Dana, hello, how you doing? Good to see you. Sherilyn, I guess maybe she left, but got a lot of good information. This what is it? Club, was it 180? Was it 180?
Yeah,
Choose 180.
Okay, yeah, I'll be calling you. Okay. The other thing is, I went to an event for the Royal Club of Seattle, Rotary Club of Seattle, the other day, and the event was on illiteracy. Okay, and it's shocking that they said at the time that 25% of the people or more that go through Seattle public schools are illiterate. And my question is, how much does illiteracy play on the school to prison pipeline?
I can speak on that. As the principal of Interagency, I have 7 diploma track campuses. One of those are a virtual campus, and I have 2 open door campuses, and I service the students in youth detention and also King County. And there's a direct correlation that all of our students there are reading below grade level. Like, they have severe academic gaps in their learning when they come to us. And so we see the prisoner pipeline actually manifest itself like once we receive our students, and their IEPs come out of date. And we're working to get the IEPs up to date. Like, all of the educational injustice you just see with our students there. So I can speak from that on a real life perspective. And then our school is also an alternative program. And so students that are excluded from the traditional programs have, you know, I would say like over 70% of our students have an underlying mental or medical underlying health condition coming to us. And that's also impacting their academics. So that's just some of the data that we receive as some of the data of our students that come to our program is that jarring. So again, that's why we need help outside of what the school district gives us, because these are students that fell through the social networks that we have within society.
I just want to throw in, I don't know, Joe, specifically as it relates to literacy, but there's a lot of discussion out there about these high stakes testing concepts of, you know, standardized tests and how schools sometimes teach to the test. And that leads to disengagement and behavioral issues because students aren't meeting those scores, and there's a whole, you know, so I just thought of it when you brought up literacy.
Anybody else want to answer that last question? Not.
I'll share quickly. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just say real quick, because there's also a follow-up in the chat around dyslexia. And as a parent of a child with dyslexia, I can say sometimes what that pipeline looks like for kids with disabilities is, you know, when kids go undiagnosed or unsupported, they turn to acting out of fear so that they don't have to show up and look stupid in front of their peers. And, you know, my child is dyslexic, and it took up until she's now in the 7th grade, until 6th grade. And I'm a parent who has the privilege of taking time off of work and still getting paid, of understanding the education system and showing up. And it took me until she was in the 6th grade to finally get supports in place. When she was in elementary school at the quote unquote good school in West Seattle that the other parents, you know, proclaim about, she was hiding in the bathroom. The school was calling and saying, you need to take your child to the doctor. She's always in the bathroom. Something's wrong. I said, no, she has anxiety. you keep telling her to read out loud. She can't, and it's stressful. And so she's come up with her own defense mechanisms to not have to be a target in the classroom, and show up. And so then, you know, you get to middle school and she reads at a 2nd grade level in the 6th grade, and you find out that the supports you thought you were set up for her are not set up. And I finally had to go into the school and say, we're all done. She's not failing up anymore. Because in order to get support, you have to fail. You have to get a support, fail it, get another support, fail it, get another support, fail it. Not all of our kids have the stamina or the home support or the community support to fail that many times in front of their peers, right? And so, and then you have to fail all the supports, and then they go, oh, wait, we did have this one last thing, right? So, and many parents don't have the time, energy, or ability to take off, you know, unpaid work to show up or understand that. They think their kids are getting the support, and their kids don't have the emotional capacity to withstand that type of support. So they lash out instead. Some kids want to get kicked out of class because the fear of being asked to read out loud, or the fear of looking stupid, or the fear of not having the answer.
Thank you so much, cousin.
I know.
Um, yeah, so like there are so many more questions in the chat, but I'm sorry, everybody seeming to get dinner for the kids, everybody's, doing stuff. And I'm about to clock out, had school all morning today. But yeah, I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank the audience for those great questions. And before I hand it off to Robin, um, they're like, how for the audience, how can you help? You heard from these professors, you heard legally, you heard straight from the principal, you heard from college level, you heard it from actual real experience, different organizations. And as you hear all this, how can you do your part to help to prevent school to prison pipeline? Um, and because I'm lucky. I would say I'm very lucky to survive out that system. Because I was in a household full of six boys, went straight to foster care, separating us by two. And then now I'm in college. So I thank God that I survived through all this. I'm living testimony, but everybody have like my brothers. I can tell you my brothers is not living the same life that I have, unfortunately. Um, they're in and out of jail. So how can you do your part? That's really the question that really that you should ask yourself. That you should really ask yourself. So yeah. I'm Trayvon Mitchell.
Trayvon,
I'm Trayvon Mitchell.
Trayvon,
I'm your
thank you for your work, Trayvon. You did an awesome job. But Michelle Whitehead has had her little hand up for a really long time. So it's not quite 8. If we could just let her do her thing, that'd be great. And then I know June has lots of websites to share with us.
For sure. But yeah, Trayvon Mitchell, your host.
Thank you, Trayvon. Thank you, Robin. It's a question and a comment. I want to say that I'm a parent of a special needs student. She's a child with intellectual disability. I am living a DEI nightmare in Issaquah School District. And I want to say I've never been given parent de-escalation training. She has been restrained and isolated for years in non-public agencies and in public schools. Where is my de-escalation training? Where are the training for these parents? How come this WISE wraparound system into CLIP administration? That is the only path through WISE and wraparound. That is the only way to get her a bed into CLIP administration is if I endure years of WISE wraparound services that didn't work, that came here to do art therapy and play therapy. I could not get her help in this state. There isn't a system here for children with severe disabilities who have behavior issues. There is not a system in place. She would have had to leave the state in order to get the services she needed, and my family would have been separated. It's a comment and a question because this is a much needed system. This is a much needed service to parents. Police have de-escalation training, teachers have de-escalation training, but parents do not. And we need this. We need to know because Molly's right. The only place I can call is the police. That's the only place I can call to de-escalate my daughter or to take her to Seattle Children's. And we have to wait 4 weeks for a bed to get her in there. Thank you guys for being here and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that. It's hard. Everyone who pre-registered for this will get the PowerPoint that June has developed for us, and my email is in there. So if you can give us some feedback on what you'd like to see differently or what other topics you'd like to have, that would be great. We'll answer every single one of them. So on behalf of RARE, thank you, Trayvon. Thank you, all of the panelists. You were amazing, amazing people. Thank you, June, for putting this all together for us. She's the engine that could and did. And we really appreciate it. June, do you have any closing thoughts?
sorry, I'm just on a new system, so I'm going to share my screen. We have, if you guys have any community feedback of future events, different discussions that you want to have, or just want to share resources, you can reach out to Robin. She is doing all the rare open discussions. And we'd like to thank you from Seattle Council PTSA. I just wanted to point out that we have, sorry, it's so hard with this little screen, but we also have legislative session right now. And so in the legislative action, Sherilyn already pointed out, we have House Bill 1479, which is isolation restraint. It came back. It was on last week, but we need to educate our legislators on why we need to change our policies on isolation restraint. And other ways that how we can help. Trayvon, thank you so much for asking that question. And I think sometimes what I've learned in PTA is ask, don't assume, right? When you think of all these assumptions of how these kids are expressing themselves and what they need, just ask and don't, ask yourself, ask them, don't assume. And just keep on educating yourself, support and build community, and whatever you can. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Trayvon. Thank you, Principal William Han. Thank you, Choose 180. Thank you, Dana Brown. Thank you, Rare, for joining us in this discussion. And we hope you have a wonderful evening and to carry your energy forward with blessings.